Hey Bikepackers, Ryan here. Today I'm going to do a quick review of the new book by Legan, who is the technical writer for the Adventure Cycling Association. He used to be the technical writer for Velo News, I believe. And this is his new book. Big title, Gravel Cycling, but it's about half and half gravel cycling, and it also adventure bike packing. So on first look, very nice photograph to begin with. It feels kind of like a coffee table book. There's tons of great photos. And like I said, the book is almost kind of half and half, a split between gravel racing and bike packing. And throughout these pages, Nick does a good job of covering kind of the history of the events and coverage of the main routes and events, both in North America and abroad. Not so much in Canada, but definitely in the US and over in Europe. Let's see here. So I think my first thought, so the first half of the book is the gravel cycling component. And what he does is he has an interview with, the people that organize the events, but also folks that have won the events. So getting their perspective on, how these events were started or how these routes were started. And then with the professionals, getting some insight into their gearing choices, their tire choices, how they pack food, how they pack water. If I was to give one big criticism of this book, it spends a lot of time going over gearing and tire choices, specifically in the gravel cycling component. And both Sarah and I agreed right away. It kind of took us out of the book because I think unless you come from like an A-type road cycler or road cyclist or cyclocross background, I find like talking about gearing and tire choices, it's not something that really comes up all that often. A lot of us, especially newer riders, who I think this book is really geared towards, because a lot of this information can be found online. So I think of it as an introduction for newer riders to talk about routes and events. And if I was to talk with a new rider, I don't really think I would spend much time talking about gearing and tire choices. And like I said, about half of each route preview spends time on that. I didn't really find that was necessary, but I also appreciate at the same time that's kind of Nick's background. So for me, for someone that's never really spent that much time on it, I learned a few things, but I probably would have preferred more time spent on, giving some anecdotal stories. Yeah, I think the only other con that I have is that each of these routes or events, he does an elevation profile, which I guess is good. It's, again, not something that I spend too much time focusing on. That's okay. But the part that I don't really feel does anything is he has these one-dimensional maps for each of the routes. And if you're not familiar with the regions that they're in, it's really just a line. It doesn't tell you anything. And again, I would have spent, that area focusing more on, some of the fun stuff, the stories. What is it all about? And, for those of us in the know, a lot of these routes, and Nick does point this out, they do change their courses from year to year. So is it that relevant to have, a map? I don't know. It's not something I would probably have included. Let's see here. So pros, again, a lot of great photos. He's definitely got a really great selection from a lot of different experts, a lot of different opinions, which is great, not just his own. Other cons, he doesn't focus at all really on any Canadian routes or events. I'm just going to flip to the map at the start here, which shows you all the different areas. So you get a good sampling of the US and a little bit over in Europe. And, he's the first to say that this is just a starter, a starter or an introduction to the key events. As he points out, there's, events popping up every year. I would have liked to have seen some Canadian routes and events highlighted. But that said, I think, probably while this was being written, a lot of our events were coming about, so I can kind of appreciate why they're not included. It is definitely, he like I said, he focuses on the routes and events, but there is a big chunk that goes over the technical, like how to pack, what to pack. That's good. Kind of tools you should have. He gets into the back. There's some fun stories with key people, key characters, we'll say, behind the scenes. Like here's an example, interview with Eric Parsons, who's the key guy behind Revelate Designs, the bags that a lot of us use. So that was cool. So that's new content, stuff you're not going to find online. So, a good overall book, very good introduction to gravel grinders, and, which I wasn't totally familiar with, and bikepacking, which, is definitely more, my forte. So I did learn something, but again, a lot of this information is online. But for the newer rider, I think, it gives you a good lay of the land, and it gives you a sense of kind of like what questions to ask if you want to learn more. Like there's introductions to camping with tarps and bivy sacks and hammocks, and they're only like a paragraph long, but it gives you a good introduction, enough to the point where you could jump off and get into more of the technical know-how online. Definitely a thumbs up for newer riders. For more experienced riders, I don't really think you're going to get a ton out of it, but it's kind of a fun keepsake and a way to keep things fresh in your mind, especially if you're not familiar with the gravel grinding scene or the bikepacking scene. But there you have it. That is my quick review of Nick's Gravel Cycling, or Complete Guide to Gravel Racing and Adventure Bikepacking.